Fantastic. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be live again with the Virtual Village Hall. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm here today to talk about my guide dogs, and the event is titled Guiding Stars because all my dogs have been little guiding stars. I do have Mr. Gus with me, but he's been a bit camera shy and he didn't want to come live just now. So he is around in the room somewhere and he may make an appearance at some point. He may not. So I hope it's lovely and sunny where you are. And if you're watching this on catch up later, then I hope you enjoy it. So my name is Fiona Kyle. Some of you might have seen me. I was doing some harp a few weeks ago, so that was really exciting. So it's lovely to come back. And today, as I say, I'm talking about guide dogs. So I have been registered blind since birth. And I say blind because I have very little vision. I have some shadow and light in my left eye, and that's as much as I've got at the moment. I did have more vision some years ago and could see colours and sort of outlines and things, but never enough to, go to, a normal school and read print and do all the things. I've always had really quite impaired vision. And I did go to mainstream primary school for a year or so, and then I went to school for the blind, first of all in Northern Ireland, where I was born and raised, and then we moved to Scotland in 1986, and I went to the Royal Blind School in Edinburgh. And the schools teach you a lot of life skills. So one of the things I started to learn was to use a long cane, which is one of those things that you see blind people sweeping around on the ground, hopefully, and not up in the air. And so I used a cane for a while, but I decided upon leaving school that I would like to apply for a guide dog because I was planning to go to university. So I did apply for a guide dog, and funnily enough, I went to a conference in Gateshead for the National Federation of the Blind. I was asked to go along and be a delegate for our branch at the time, and I ended up going on my own because everybody else bailed out due to sickness and other things. So I went to this big hotel by myself, no dog at that time, and met loads of other blind people some of who had guide dogs, and I heard them walking about with their dogs and asking the dog to find the bar, and which is a very good command, something guide dogs don't teach you, but never mind. And I just thought, this is so cool. And so eventually I was matched with my first guide dog, Velma, in 1996. And it was just time before I went to university in Stirling. And Stirling University, if anyone hasn't been, it's very much out in the country. So there's loads of wildlife. And we had numerous times of Velma trying to get to lectures, of Velma getting distracted by rabbits and squirrels and all sorts of things. Lots of funny stories about Velma at university. She used to snore loudly during lectures and dream. And the lectures sometimes, especially when we were in tutorials, they would kind of look around and say, "What's that noise?" And the dog would be dreaming and snoring. One time she threw up in a lecture because she'd eaten too many strawberries. I hope no one from Guide Dogs is listening, by the way. But she was there by my side all through university. I studied social work, so I had to go out on placement to various workplaces in Stirling and around. So we had to travel by train to get there. We had to go out into the community and visit people. So Velma was there, right by my side from that point on until she obviously retired. So I'm just going to quickly stop and just ask Victoria, who is my co-host, if there are any comments or any questions that we need to answer at this point.
Hi, Fiona. No comments or questions so far.
Oh, good. That means everybody's listening then. So I thought I would talk about the sort of life of a guide dog, really, from start to finish. And the life of a guide dog roughly begins around about 8 weeks when they're born, and then around about 8 weeks they are taken away from their mum and put out to what they now call puppy raisers. It used to be called puppy walkers, and that they tend to be with their puppy walkers. Now the timings are very different because of COVID and just different things. I'm guessing around 12 to 14 months. Sometimes it can be longer, and these families, individuals or couples, whoever they might be, these lovely people are volunteers, and they agree to have the dog and raise the dog in their home for that however long it needs to take. And they do the very important things like toilet training, obedience, working on the lead, getting the dog to walk nicely, socializing the dog, taking the dog to all sorts of different things, like maybe taking it to church, taking it to out for meals, taking it to anything that they might be doing, maybe lots of different things. And also they take the dog on public transport, into shopping centres, lots of different things. So it really gets the dog used to being out and about, because that's what they're going to have to do when they become fully fledged guide dogs. And once that puppy raising has been completed, the dogs are then taken to a training school. The nearest one we have in Scotland is in Forfar, just outside Dundee, and the dogs are taken there and they start their very important, beginning of the training, learning how to wear their harness. A guide dog is trained to walk in a straight line. So the dog walks along the street, avoiding any obstacles, any people, any street furniture, anything like that. So, it's quite structured, the way that we work with our dogs. And sometimes I will be crossing a road. Now, I won't be crossing, but we have to get the dog up to a curb so that we can either turn left, turn right, go back, or go straight ahead. So it's a kind of an orientation point. So it's almost like little crossroads every curb that we reach. So sometimes if you guys are thinking that we're crossing the road, sometimes we're not. And I really wanted to do this talk today just to raise awareness about guide dogs and what they do, and really how a guide dog has impacted on my life. So you will hear little hints and bits of just me popping in random things as I remember them. So the dogs do their very basic beginning training, and then they move on to advanced training, which is where they begin to look at matching them with a blind person, such as myself. Sometimes that's done in the training school. Sometimes they move out to offices within the area. So there's one in Hamilton, I know, in Scotland, and there's one in Edinburgh, which is where Gus was trained. Actually, he was trained out down in the Borders. So once it becomes time for matching, we've applied for a dog, and every dog is different, and every time you apply for a guide dog, you go through the same process. Everything has to be, just because it's a new dog, it still almost gets treated like you've had your first one. So you have to do everything the same as you did at the very beginning. So when I got Velma, actually, we didn't have matching at all. I just went and got her. But subsequently, with my other 3 dogs, Chrissy, a black lab with a K, spelled with a K, Jerry, who's also a girl, black lab retriever as well, and we've got Gus. I've got Gus now, who's a lab retriever. He's golden. He's obviously a boy, first boy. So what normally happens is, when they decide that this dog might be right, you get the call, and we'll have been on a waiting list for quite some time, depending. It can be months, it can be even a year, might be more than that. Obviously, with the pandemic, everything has changed a little bit. Timings have altered quite significantly, I think, for a lot of people too. So, for example, I was on the waiting list for 9 months for Gus. So basically, you get the call that says, "We think we found a dog. Can we bring the dog up?" So that's what kind of happens. They bring the dog up to your home. With Gus, I actually got 2 days matching walks, because the instructor, because she'd had to travel so far, so she stayed over, and then we did another route the next day. So I walked out with him just up the high street and just got him to find a shop, and it was just to see how we would, just initially how we would get on. If I think the dog feels right for me, which obviously I have done with all of mine, then we proceed to actually go to train with the dog. Now, that usually is residential. You go away for 2 weeks, I think it's 2.5 weeks, to a hotel. When I trained initially with my first dog, it was actually at the Forfar training centre, which is gone now, but it was a residential centre. And obviously the training school is not residential. There's no facilities for training humans, it's just for training dogs. So this last time I trained in a hotel down in Edinburgh, which was such a difficult job, having to stay in a hotel, having everything done for you. That's the good side of it. The downside of it is that sometimes you are, you have to work in routes that you don't know. once that side of the training is complete, and we well, it's called qualification. We don't get a qualification. We don't pass anything. You know, obviously, if things were really not working out, then obviously guide dogs would know. They would know within the first week or so, and things would change. But we sometimes call it qualification. But basically, it just means you are matched and you are deemed to be working safely. They take the L plates off and you can go on your own. So once that happens, then guide dogs come up to your home and they do some follow-up work. Because obviously the dog doesn't know where it's going. Dogs don't know where they're going anyway. People think, oh, you just pick up a guide dog and off you go. It's really not that simple. The dogs have to be shown the route. I have to know where I'm going. Over time, they get to understand where they are. They get to anticipate a little bit, because we went into the butcher yesterday and we might go in today. Shall we just try it and see? Sometimes they'll try and take you into a shop. And if you don't want to go in, you just say, no, not today. Thank you. And walk on and just praise them for finding it. So life is, yes, we get the training and we get home and we do a follow-up. And then we're kind of left to just kind of get on with our lives and start to use the dog for all the different things that we have to do. So I'm just going to stop briefly and just double check if there's any questions at this point, Victoria. Comments?
Hi, Fiona. Mandy says, beautiful and amazing animals that make such an impact on people's lives. Thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge.
Oh, thank you, Mandy. That's lovely. Excellent. That's so nice. So once we've done the training, we have our dogs throughout our lives, and it's amazing what guide dogs can do for us. Obviously, the very important things of guiding us along any street in the country. Now, it doesn't mean if you go somewhere different, they don't know where they're going. You just have to rely on them to keep you safe, stop you falling off a curb, keep you safe, keep you away from traffic, and they will do all of that. They can find doors, they can find stairs, they can find lifts, they can find chairs. Gus is particularly good at that. My second guide dog, Chrissy, she was a bit of a terror. She was a bit of a delinquent, and she could guide wonderfully when you're in a city or somewhere, but at home she just didn't seem, I don't know whether she just never seemed to, she's got bored. And so you'd think that she was taking you into a shop, and then she'd just twirl around and scavenge something off the floor. And you were like, what? So she was a bit of a naughty dog at times. But as I say, worked brilliantly in a city. So I think she may, sometimes the match isn't always as perfect as we would like. And they are dogs at the end of the day, even though they are highly trained. And they often will get distracted by other dogs or by people looking at them, or so, but they do find all these wonderful things for us. And as I say, Gus can find chairs anywhere. He always seems to think you want to sit down when you go somewhere, which makes me laugh. And, I can do, having the long cane is great. And there are people that, will never have a guide dog because their choice, it's people's personal choice. So sometimes, people will use a long cane, and that's fantastic. I find the long cane just very stressful because you're constantly having to sweep and try and get round obstacles. The guide dog does it all for you. You just you have to learn to trust them, and the partnership isn't instantaneous. You don't just leave training and that's you got your dog. I think us as people, blind people, make it look very easy, and I also think people often assume that we're training the dog for some reason. And I'm like, no, the dog's fully trained, but we have to reinforce the training all of the time. We have to make sure the dog stops at the curbs and sits at steps. We have to make sure that the dogs are keeping, in a straight line. They're not getting too distracted. So we do have to, and sometimes we might raise our voice a little bit if the dog's not paying attention, but we're certainly not in any way being cruel to the dog or anything like that. We do use gentle leaders or halties, and that's just to give us a little bit more control of the dog's head when it's working. And, it looks easy, but the partnership really takes a good 6 months to a year to become established. So I think that's something that people don't realise. And yes, these dogs are amazing, but unfortunately they're only as amazing as, you know, the partnership is amazing. So it has to come from both of us. Gus needs my guidance as much as I need his. So he needs me to tell me to go left or right. You know, he needs me to reassure him if it's a tight obstacle. Yes, you can go through it. You know, because the dogs will sometimes hesitate if there's not a lot of room to get past. That is one of the things I find quite amazing, that they can sort of maneuver us around these obstacles. And I mean, we will get bumps initially because the dogs are trying to, obviously they've worked with a trainer who's one width, and then they're working with me who's like another width. So that all just ironed itself out in the process of us getting to know each other. So that can take a good year. And I mean, Gus and I've been together with Gus for 3 years, so we're pretty established. We're just, you know, he's just a big part of my life, as all of my dogs have been. And it basically means for me that I have the confidence and the independence to go out. And that, I mean, that's, you know, that's given to me. It's an amazing gift, but it's given to me by the fact that these dogs have been puppy raised, the fact that, you know, the trainers have trained them, then they've trained me, and then I've kept up the training that Gus has had. And we do use treats a lot to reinforce things. So when Gus has found a chair, or he's found the stairs, or he's found something, he gets a treat. Not for every shop he finds, but counters in shops, that's a really important thing. He'll get a treat for finding those. So, you know, you'll often see us giving the dogs treats, and it is part of their daily allowance. It's not that they are given extras. And I would also say to people, especially if you're in the park and the dog's off lead, to not feed them and to not give them any treats at all. Even, you know, very kindly you've asked the owner, and people will say, and I usually say no thank you, because the dog is on a strict diet. If people were giving him treats, then he would go towards those people, possibly if we saw you again. So obviously, you know, it doesn't always happen like that, but I have known it to happen. So I've made mistakes in the past where I've allowed people to give my dogs treats, and then they've just seen that person and just gone towards them like, oh, hello, you give me a treat. So very important not to feed guide dogs ever, and not to give them any treats, even if you've asked the owner and the owner says no, just accept. So yeah, I have the independence to go and visit friends on the train or on the bus or on the plane even. Obviously, my dogs, as I've said, helped me through my working career as a social worker for a few years. I had my dogs with me. When I was studying complementary therapies, I had my dogs in college with me. Obviously, as I've gone out with my harp business, I've always had my dogs. That's quite a nice one for them, because they don't have to do much work. Sometimes they guide me into the venue, but actually a lot of the time they just lay around and get patted all day. But they still have to behave. And Gus at one point we were at a wedding, and he was lying with the bride had a massive train, because she had this amazing dress. It was just all covered in tulle, and it was such a hot day, and her dress kind of flowed over Gus's paws, and she was just lying there like he was just lying there going, oh, this is all right. So all my dogs, Gus and Jerry in particular, have had to do the heart work with me and do weddings. So the dogs are an amazing icebreaker when you're out and about. If you're going in somewhere you don't know, or going into a function, or going into just somewhere unknown, the people will automatically gravitate towards the dogs, and that means that we can start to speak to people. That was very much evident at university, and you know, even Gus and I like to go for coffee a lot, so we end up in coffee shops and people come and chat to us, and that's fine as long as the dog is off lead, and as long as you've off harness, I mean, not off lead, and as long as you've asked the owner. First of all, I'd always say to ask the guide dog owner before you touch the dog at all. Probably with COVID at the moment, it's probably best that you really don't touch them too much, but I don't mind if people, you know, especially children, I don't mind kids patting the dogs, because they need to know the importance of a guide dog. So when the guide dog is in harness, I'd ask you please just not to acknowledge them at all. You're very welcome to, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm talking about myself here, but wherever you are in the country, you know, you're very welcome to go up and speak to a guide dog owner and say your dog's beautiful, but to just acknowledge the dog, not give it any eye contact as well, because I've noticed that I've been told that Gus, quite often people will look at him and he looks at them, so that's immediate distraction. Gus could walk me into a lamppost, and that would, you know, be very could end up being injured, basically. And I know it sounds like I'm guilt tripping, but it's not. It really is. These dogs are here for our safety. So it's really important if you can. And I know it's difficult. And people say to me, oh, but I can't resist. And I say to them, I'm really sorry, but you have to while the dog's working. So as I say, if you see a guide dog out and about and it's off duty, it's lying quietly, just approach the owner and just say, hello, is it okay if your dog's beautiful? Is it okay if I chat to the dog? And if the owner is okay with it, then yeah. So my dogs are amazing. Even despite the fact that, they all have their little quirks, they all have their little personality differences. They have really all helped me throughout my life so far. So I'm just going to stop again, Victoria, and ask if there's any questions or comments that you would like to read out.
Maria says, thank you for sharing your story and educating us on the rules with the guide dogs. It's really important.
Yay. Thank you. Yeah, so this is what this session is about. It's about raising awareness of guide dogs, because I think, you never know. You won't know these things until you know them, until you meet a guide dog. And I bet you tomorrow, lots of you will go out and you'll see a guide dog. But if it doesn't feature in your everyday life, as with a lot of things, you're not going to know about it. So, and the best people to ask are the people who are actually working the guide dogs and using them on a daily basis. So yes, our dogs can live with us for varying times throughout their lives. So obviously we have them 24/7. I take my dog to the park. So people will probably ask this, how do you exercise your dog? I take my dog to the park a few times a week and let him off the lead. Sorry, Gus. Let him off the lead. He has a special play collar with bells on it, and we have a whistle. So he is trained to know that when that whistle goes, he gets food. So when we're feeding the dogs, we whistle feed them as well. So the dogs will go straight to their dinner only when we are told, when they're told to do so. So it does sound very strict, but these are working dogs. We have to, there has to be a certain amount of slightly more structure than there may be with a dog that's just a pet dog. Having said that, these dogs are great companions. They're not allowed on furniture or anything like that, but I don't have my dogs on sofas or beds or anything like that. But Gus does have his bed in the room with me, which not everybody likes, but I do, because I live in a small flat, and because when I went to university, I obviously had to have my dog in the room with me. So I got used to having the dog and listening to its breathing and dreaming and all these things. So I'm very used to that. The dogs get off the lead, they can have a run around, they can meet with other dogs, and we call them with the whistle, and they come back kind of sometimes, most of the time. And, that's a lovely experience. And sometimes I go out with friends and we go different places with the dogs. Sometimes we go out in the car. My sister-in-law will take me out. Sometimes we'll go out into the woods, so that Gus will have a different place to run. When we're visiting friends, we always find places for Gus to run, or when I'm going on holiday somewhere, we'll find. So he always has tried to make that balance of work and play as well. Obviously, when the dogs are in the house, somebody once asked me, they said, so when you go home, do you take the dog's harness off, or do you need it in the house? And I'm like, what? No, you take the harness off. So what is a silly question? Obviously, if I'm in a hotel or something, when we're going out of the room to go down for breakfast or lunch or dinner or something, I will, because we do stay in hotels sometimes for work. So I will obviously put Gus's harness on, because he has to guide me to find the lift or to find the stairs or whatever I need. But obviously in the house, the harness is most definitely off, and he has that space to just chill and relax, and we play with toys and we have cuddles. It is a really beautiful partnership, actually. I think when you've done all the work and you can keep up the training and things work well, and the dog does what you want it to do, it really is, it's really precious. It's probably as good as having children, really. I think it's that sort of relationship. I feel it is anyway. Unfortunately though, there does come a time when the dogs have to retire, and that is always quite hard, because although sometimes we can keep the dogs, you are kind of letting go of the working relationship. So there is a difference. There is a chapter in life that closes but is never forgotten. So when it comes for the dog to retire, there are several options. We can keep our dogs if we have the space and we have someone to take the dogs out, because we, as guide dog owners, we cannot take the new dog out on the harness and take the old dog out on the lead alongside. That's not allowed. So if I was to keep my dogs, I would have to have somebody to walk them. I haven't kept any of my dogs with me during retirement because it wasn't fair. As I say, I'm in a small flat. There's not space for 2 dogs. It's okay if a dog wants to come and stay for a few days, but not on a permanent basis. I've been really, really lucky that friends, family, colleagues, work colleagues have stepped forward and offered themselves to take my dogs. And so I've known where the dogs have gone. I've sort of invited myself along for a visit to see the house where they're going, just so I can get a feel. And because you want to make sure that your dog is going to be in a good place, you want them to have a lovely retirement. They've worked so hard. And so you want that for them. If I can't keep the dog, if a family member or a work colleague can't keep the dog, and I will just say a quick shout out to everyone that has kept my dog so far. Not all of you will be listening, I'm sure, but I just want to extend my thanks because you have done a great service for all of them. So if we can't keep the dog, if we can't find someone that we know to keep the dog, then guide dogs will rehome the dog. That then means that the dog is taken and we won't know where the dog has gone. The only thing that happens is that we can ask guide dogs if we can say to guide dogs, look, I'd like to be contacted. Very similar to what we do with the puppy raisers who have the dogs. We are given the contact number of the puppy raiser when we qualify with our dogs, and it's then up to us to either phone or email or whatever to our puppy raisers and just say, hi, I've got your puppy. I always phone mine in the first few weeks, months of us being together. I think it's a really nice thing to do, and I think it's nice for the puppy raisers to know that their dogs are okay, that they're safe, even though guide dogs have told them that they're qualified and they're working. I think it's nice for the owner to give them a wee phone. They don't have to keep in touch. I send Christmas cards to all of mine. Well, not so much now. The more dogs you get, I think after the dog passes, I tend not to keep in touch really. But with Facebook now, of course, they can keep in touch anyway. So I tend to, certainly with my current dogs, I tend to speak to the puppy raiser every so often and just make sure that just let them know the dog's okay. And if needs be, we will develop a lovely friendship like I have with Gus's puppy walkers, puppy raisers. They're on Facebook, and we have met them. We've stayed over with them and things like that. So but it doesn't always have to be like that. So retirement, as I say, can come at different stages. My first dog retired when she was 9. My second dog, Chrissy, retired when she was 7, 6.5, 7. Chrissy, unfortunately, had an accident. She was hit by a car and she was off work for a good 3-4 months at least. She had to go back to the training school for her to be rehabilitated. She had broken her pelvis. Amazingly, she made it through. She wasn't killed. She was off duty at the time. Chrissy was just willful, and she just ran out onto a side road in a field where we were, and she was just knocked down. We were very lucky that she survived. She did come back to work, but her working was never the same. And I made a decision that we needed to train for a guide dog, retrain with another guide dog. And as I've said before, that can take some time for that to happen. And there can be times where, because obviously once you start to look at retirement, then you look at the dog's health, you look at, getting the dog health check much more often. Guide dogs will visit usually once a year to follow up and just make sure that everything's going okay. But as the dog gets older, they will visit a little bit more often or have a little bit more contact. So with Chrissy, I had 3 months where I didn't have a dog, and it makes me laugh actually. Shouldn't the amount of places I go in and people say, "Have you no dog today?" And I think, isn't it obvious that I don't have the dog with me? But I was always trying to be polite, not say, can you not see that I don't have the dog? And I said, oh, she's off sick just now, or I wouldn't say something. It was quite a difficult time to kind of try and just say your dog wasn't working, and I didn't know if she would come back to work and different things. And somebody said, oh, so they don't give you a dog instead, then just get another dog until your dog's well enough. I said, it's not like a car, it's not like a courtesy car. They don't just pick one off the shelf. As I probably said, there's a lot goes into matching these dogs. So we often have to use our cane skills when we don't have the dog with us, or if the dog's off sick. As I say, it might just be a day thing. You have to go out with the cane because the dog's not well. So it's important to keep up the cane skills. And that's the same when you're transitioning between dogs. You can have a gap between, one dog and the next, because the dog has retired before your new dog has been matched. I've been very, very lucky that I've had literally days between my dogs because I've just managed to retire them and get the dog or retire them just in time for the next one, as soon as I've known about the next one. So as I say, Chrissy did retire early, but Jerry, on the other hand, my previous dog, she worked till she was 10 and a half. Unfortunately, she passed away when she was 12, and that was just literally 2 years ago now. And I still miss her, but she did have a good life. She had a short retirement, but in that retirement she enjoyed just being around and being able to do nothing and just chill and not have to worry about work. And it was, I know lots of you will have been there when your dogs have been put to sleep. It was something that I didn't ever, it never happened with the other three because they were further away, but my friend who'd had Jerry was local. So it just so happened that she said that Jerry hadn't been feeling well and she was going to take her to the vet, and she still kept the same vet. So I just happened to say, well, I'm free, do you want me to come up with you, as I had done on various occasions. And they basically discovered that Jerry had cancer, and it just had become a big mass, and we never knew about it. So I don't think she had it very long, but it just meant that there was really nothing they could do for her. And so she had just turned 12. It's always sad when you lose the dogs, when you get the phone call, and you feel sad for a day or so, and then you kind of go on. But Jerry had stayed with me a lot during her retirement, so I think hers feels the most, even now, like 2 years later, still feel a little bit like, oh my God, I really miss her. But I was there when she was put to sleep, which was very sad, but also it was just lovely to be with her at the end of her life and say to her, like, you did an amazing job and thank you so much. And so it was time for her to pass over, and that's just how it goes. And I have Gus now. He is 5, believe it or not, so he hopefully will work for another few years yet. So I'm just going to quickly stop again and ask if there's any more questions or any comments before I conclude, Victoria.
Hi, Fiona. So Mandy is asking, how easy is it to volunteer to provide a home for the dogs during their training? And what is the time period for this before they move on to their owner?
Oh, right, Mandy. Oh, it sounds like you've got some knowledge there. Yeah, I couldn't actually tell you. I think they look for dogs. I'm not quite sure what you mean by the training. If you mean puppy raising, that's normally between sort of 12 and 14 months, sometimes longer. But they also, which I didn't mention, they also board the dogs out during their advanced training. I think it's called fostering now. And so you can also volunteer to do that, but you have to be quite local to the training school. So I don't know where you are in the country, but what I would advise you do is to go onto the Guide Dogs website, guidedogs.org.uk, and there should be some contact details on there, and just phone up and find out how you can volunteer. I'm sure there will definitely be openings for either puppy raising, fostering a dog during training. You can also board a dog. Like, for example, if I wanted to go on holiday, I'm sure there are people around about who board guide dogs who have gone through that process. So you can even board a dog for like a couple of weeks while their owner goes on holiday. So there's lots of different options. You could, which is something else I should mention as well. Guide dogs have lots of different services, but one of the things they also do is My Sighted Guide, which means that you can become a sighted guide for someone who doesn't have a guide dog, or whose guide dog is ill, or maybe who's waiting between dogs, just to get them out and give them a little bit of confidence because it can be incredibly isolating when you're blind and you can't get out by yourself. It's really debilitating. So these people provide a voluntary role maybe once a week, take someone out for coffee or to a hospital appointment, or just get them out and about. So that is also, there's tons of volunteer options, to be honest, for guide dogs. I'm a volunteer speaker and speaker trainer. So I help people deliver talks on how guide dogs. I teach them sort of how to do it, kind of. Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Lovely. Anything else, Victoria?
Sheila says, what an interesting talk, Fiona. I have so enjoyed listening to your story and learning more about how the working dog benefits you personally. Hope to see you soon and meet Gus.
Oh, I wonder if I know if that might be, is that Sheila Quavell by any chance?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, Sheila, hi, yeah. Yeah, she said she's going to join today, actually. She's a lady who plays the harp. So I don't think she's maybe not met Gus, actually, because it's been a while since we've had courses together. So hi, Sheila, lovely to have that you've been able to join in today. Fantastic. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay, well, I just want to conclude really by saying thank you again to the Virtual Village Hall for having me. Hopefully I have covered the sort of birth to retirement of a guide dog, and just to say that the cycle keeps continuing, and I hope to have many more dogs in my lifetime, but at the moment I'm enjoying having Gus with me and being able to, obviously during the pandemic, none of us could do anything, and that's a very strange thing to be having for guide dogs. They must have found it quite strange not being able to go out very much and go into coffee shops and things, but things are opening up now, and we're hopefully going to be on the train again quite soon, so I'm looking forward to that. And is there any other questions or any other comments, Victoria, before we close this?
We've got Mandy just saying again, thank you for answering her question. She said it must be a very lonely and difficult time for you when you're separated from your best friends, but such a great relationship that you share.
Yeah, it was, and I think it's important to point out the difficult times too, because I think people can think that a guide dog is incredibly easy, and at times it can be challenging, and at times it can be hard when you're separated for whatever reason. I even hate going away without Gus for a night. It's horrible. You miss them. It's really silly, but sometimes you can't take your dog everywhere. Are you coming over to say hi to everybody? Come here. No, he's not. He's going through there. Are you coming here? Come here, Gus. I don't think we can see him, unfortunately. We tried to position the camera, but it wasn't really working in our favour. So, yeah, it is hard to be separated from them, even just for a couple of hours, because sometimes I don't take Gus everywhere. If it's a very busy, if I was going to a rock concert or something, I wouldn't take him. I do take him to the theatre and the cinema and, all these kind of things. But obviously there are certain times when you don't take your dog to places because it just wouldn't be appropriate, like a festival or something, like I don't know, Glastonbury or somewhere, because it would just be really crowded, and so it's not really fair. So you do have to use a bit of common sense with that. But yeah, thank you for that, Mandy. Anyone else, Victoria?
That's the end of our comments and questions.
Is that us then?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, maybe people, you can always put comments in afterwards and I will answer them as best I can. I want to thank you, Victoria, for being my co-host, and I want to thank Virtual Village Hall for having me back, and all of you who are listening and who will be listening, hopefully, on the replay. And if you do have any questions, just pop them in the comments and I'll try and answer them. But it's been lovely to chat, and thank you again. And I'll not say too much, but I will be back quite soon doing another thing. So I'll not say any more just now. But take care, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely day, whatever you're up to. Much love from me and Gus. Bye for now.